Welcome back to another SCX24 tuning session, and today we're going to be focusing on this MOFO prototype chassis, and this is going to be less of a road to 60/40 and more of a road back to 60/40. So when this guy was originally built, it was basically kind of a super light chassis, aluminum knuckles, plastic housing, aluminum servo tray, aluminum links, aluminum trailing arms. I think I've got some plastic uppers, so pretty lightweight, but the final kind of 60/40 tuning was achieved through some pretty heavy wheel and tire sets. So I had two sets and I had it sitting at a perfect 60/40, but that basically doubled the weight of the chassis with the wheel sets on there, so super heavy. And what I found was it was a little bit of a strain for this 030 motor, which is about the only little tiny guy you can fit in this chassis. So I've got a little torque beast in there right now. So to get a little more wheel speed and alleviate a little strain on that motor, you can see here I swapped to some lightweight wheels and tires. So these are aluminum wheels, glue on tires to these deep dish Gunk RC wheels, but I think they look really good. Super huge offset. These are probably the deepest dish standard rims I've seen. So since this does not have any extensions, that gets these kind of wheels and tires away from the shocks when they're leaning there. So at full lock, I'm not getting into that. So some of the tuning I've already started. Obviously we've got wheels and tires on here, and I pulled off the plastic axle and the aluminum knuckles that were on there, and swapped in some brass TREAL knuckles and an aluminum housing I had, and it had a brass diff. I put on a lighter weight brass diff since I added the knuckles. So the hope was to add back some of that weight that I removed from the rotating mass of those heavy wheels, and to put that as just static mass up here low, so the motor's not having to really deal with that other than move the weight, but it's not having to rotate the weight on the wheels. So that's kind of where the tuning sits right now. And I did add my favorite little new wire management accessory, rubber band, to hold this servo wire, because it kind of slots up and down in that side bit there, you can see. So I'm loving that. Just a nice little easy piece of wire management. But I think the big thing, other than retuning the weight here, is of course I've got some alternate wheels and tires, but for the keen eye you'll notice some magnet mounts have been added to the chassis. So I added this little Jeep cross piece, just double-sided it, you can see here, to the frame, and snipped the nub, glued on a magnet. And then the rear, these are rear shock mount, body post mounts from a JLU, I believe. So one screw through there and just glued in a magnet on top. So what am I prepping for? Well, here's the big news. Little baby Ecto. So I've created myself a little SCEcto24 hybrid here. So I am super happy with how this guy turned out. I used a new paint, so this is a translucent silver, and I did a couple of light clear coats, and then I backed that with black, and you get this kind of deep mirror finish. You can see the reflection here. It almost looks like real metal. So I kind of went with this aircraft theme, and obviously inverted the roll bar for more of a wing on the back. Of course, got some JLU hinges, Pitbull batteries. So that ended up being a nice little door moniker. And then this is from the full-size Element sticker pack from the Night Runner, I believe. Some of these are. And of course I had to get some axial badging, and these are actually JLU turn signals for the lights. So I just think that came out awesome. And then of course a little grill detail around that fuel cell. What was funny is I delayed this body so long, I was going all over the place on what I wanted to do to the bed, as far as black it out, bed line it, stripe it, and I finally decided on nothing because I didn't want to cover any of this really nice reflective paint. So just such a nice finish, but I'm definitely using this paint again. This will not be the last of the translucent silver. So anyways, I think that's how it sits now. So the first thing I need to do is probably get it on the scales, see what the weight is now after a little tweaking and throwing a body on there. Well, before we move on to the weigh-in, I wanted to talk a little more about this little baby Ecto body. I'm sure some people will be interested in using this. So this is basically a deadbolt rear and a JLU C10, I guess, Bronco front on here. And you can see here, I'm right at the limits here. So the diff gets right inside the body, and it looks like the servo's back, but it's really not. When it swings down, it's basically right there at the front edge. So this is a shorty little body, super narrow. I wasn't originally planning to put a body on this chassis, but it was too narrow for the chassis I had planned because I wanted to do a horizontal battery up here, and this guy is just too narrow for that kind of setup. So I was just playing around and threw it on this chassis and was like, wow, this fits pretty well. And the fact that I broke a shock mount at one point, and I've since shoegooed that back and re-drilled a new shock point, but I think that was due to the heavy wheels, and when this thing fell, of course, you know, heavier it weighs, harder it falls. So I think lightening it up will help, but also throwing a little body on there will help protect this 3D printed frame from taking direct hits. So anyways, that's what kind of led to the body. And then with this translucent silver paint, in the past few, I guess gunmetal or metallic paint jobs I've done, I've had some magnet ghosting. So I did a little test spray on this guy first and a magnet, and you can see this did ghost very finely through there, a little ring. So to avoid that, some other people have done some sort of tape. So I just did my black kind of masking tape. It's not really masking tape, I forget what the tape is, but it's basically feels like masking tape. Has a good stick, but it'll peel off if you peel it. But you know, I've been pulling this body on and off, and nothing has even started to pull on that tape. I mean, it's made sure it was clean surface and down really nicely, and it's all riding in that groove nicely. I didn't think anything, this is just black, I didn't think there'd be a problem up here, but since I did it back here, I thought let me just try this method all the way around, and it seems to be working well. And of course, no rings on the back, no bleed through of magnet glue, so that's awesome. But anyways, I think now let's get this guy on the scale, get a baseline for the start of this. Let's fire these scales up and get a baseline weigh-in. So you can see I took the wheels and tires off, and that's because I want to get an apples to apples comparison to the original chassis without wheels and tires. So originally it was 197 grams at a 57:43 front ratio. So now with the aluminum axle, the lighter weight brass diff, and actual TREAL brass knuckles, we'll see what the chassis sits at. So from 197 we jumped up to, looks like 216, so almost 20 grams there, and we're sitting at a perfect 60/40 now without wheels and tires. So that's a great start point. So we'll get the wheels and tires on here, weigh that, we'll get the body on there, weigh that, get the ultimate kind of baseline for this tuning session. All right, wheels and tires are on. And again, this is with the battery installed. We're zeroed out. Let's see where we sit. So it looks like a 58.42. So we dropped back a little bit with the wheels and tires on there. Of course, we gained some weight, jumped up to 293 from 216. So let's get the body on there and let's see what this ultimate kind of starting weight is. So that added a little bit and dropped us back 1%, probably due to this plastic roll bar in the back. So it was 216 as a chassis with no wheels and tires, and so we're 100 grams basically heavier with body, wheels, and tires at 319, and we've dropped back 3%. So probably should have left the heavier diff cover in place instead of the lighter one. This won't be accurate because we'll be removing the lighter one, so that may not even give us a full percent right there, but I could swap that on. I do have a MOFO brass tray. This is not going to be accurate either because I'll be pulling out the aluminum one, but that's definitely heavier, so some kind of combo of a heavier diff, heavier brass tray may get us to a perfect 60/40. So that may be the route to go. The other route, I've got some lightweight brass hexes that are, I mean, they're not lightweight, they're weighted hexes, but they're the lighter version of the weighted hexes. So I was trying to keep as much rotational mass off of the wheels, but these hex weights are smaller diameter, so you know, it's not like you've got a massive, heavy outer ring spinning. But anyways, I think probably a little tweak to the front axle, reweigh it, and then we'll look at the alternate wheels and tires. All right, I've got all my tuning options out here in front of me. I did find another opportunity at the rear. There is a brass, lightweight brass diff cover, but I can swap that to a plastic. So that will help push my percentage forward. But before we started, I just wanted to sit it. So that's full extension of the shocks. And this has the battery in it right now. So that's not bad. And you can see it, full extension of the shocks, like the front seems to sit a little higher. If I drop it, I've got the soft springs in the front and it settles, so it actually gets a little rake. And the rear is a little bit high with the stiffer springs. So I've got some rubber bands out here. So I'm thinking of implementing some limiter straps just at the shock points to settle that guy down, because I think with the body on here, of course this is without further tuning, yeah, it's not gonna have enough to sit there. So I think maybe limiting those down and getting it to sit about like that may help. So I'm gonna slip those on and we can check that right now. So I've got kind of assorted sizes. I'm not sure the tension yet. They're all gonna basically be pretty close to the same. These are obviously a little more tension, but these are the stiffer springs, so that might be required. So I'm just hooking them around the trailing arm mount at the bottom, and then around there, and then the fronts, I'm gonna go a tad bit looser, but again, just right there, and I don't even have to take the shocks off. I think I can just squeeze it between the bolts. Yep, right behind there. So now that's riding right behind the mount, so it's not gonna come off. So I'm gonna put another one on the front. Let's see if I can start this one at the bottom first. That's on. Boom, easy. Look at that, sitting flat. Look at that, that looks nice and low. Ooh, and that did the trick. So now the shocks aren't unloading. Let's get a side shot of that. So what I don't want to do is raise the center of gravity with this brass weight, so I may go this, that, and these, and see what it does. That looks nice, sitting low. So I think that's going to be the first move, is hold off on the brass tray and see what this does right there, see if that gets us to the 60/40. Here we are, got the tuning complete, at least for the first stage before we check in. So I took off both of the lightweight brass front and rear diffs, put on the heavyweight front diff, took off the front plastic hexes, put on those lightweight front hex weights, and then I left the brass MOFO servo tray off for now, so it's just got the aluminum MOFO servo tray. So just want to see what that little tweak did right there. So we've got the battery in. Oh, so close. Let's see if we can get this to settle better. Magically, look at that. Second time's the charm. 60/40. So that worked without using that brass servo tray. That's nice. So let's just wiggle it. It's basically flat because of those limiter straps. So it is sitting a little heavier to the right than the left, 5149, but that's not really a concern. So that is awesome, 330 overall. So let's see if it can still stand on its side with those limit straps. And it looks like it can. Awesome, awesome, sweet. So I think you know what time it is. It's time to look at some alternate wheels and tires. All right, here we are with some alternate wheels and tires. My favorite part of any build or tuning session. So you can see I brought out a buddy here. That's because we're going to be using these new 55mm Injora pin tires. So these are about 20mm wide. So these are the original pin tires they came out with. So you can see those are just massive. So these bring them down to where you can use them on a little more scale rig. And they scaled everything down pretty nicely. If we look at the pin spacing here, they scaled that down as well. These feel really nice. I think it's the same compound. Foams feel good. I think I'm just going to use these foams in them. And then for the wheels, I did something I normally don't do. I bought some wheels that I don't like. I've never really liked these TREAL Type C wheels. Nothing is really wrong with them. I just usually like a deeper inset face. But I had the idea, since that's a flat face, to flip them, since these come with the removable hubs, and create like a super deep dish spoke wheel. So you can see the two different hubs there. I believe maybe a +3 and just a +0, but you can see I've only got 2 out there because I've already mounted 2 up. And I added some Maz Design scale hardware on the hub. So you can see around the ring, all you see is the back side of the screws. So it almost looks like super scale, little rivets. So you get this just super deep dish spoke wheel. And man, these feel good. And then here's the back side with all the beadlock bling. So no need for any scale hardware there. And then you can see that hub. So that hub basically put me out the same width that these OGRCs sit. So hopefully it ought to be about the same geometry as far as where everything kind of contacts the shock or the body. But I'm gonna go ahead and get these mounted up. I think I'm gonna weigh a wheel. These do have brass rings on there. And of course we'll weigh them assembled, and we'll weigh those OGRC. I just wanna see what the wheels are, but a little more mounting to do, and then we'll move forward here. Okay, I wanted to check the weight here on these wheels real quick, but before we start, I want to put the original wheels that were on this, the weights on the screen, and of course it had 2 sets, and they were both weighted with a bias to the front, so I'll put those on the screen. So you can see pretty heavy in the like 50s, 60s So let's just look at the TREAL bare rim with the brass ring, 22.7. So that's about average for an aluminum wheel with a brass ring. So the full assembly, 30.9, and then the OGRC with the glued tire aluminum rim, 19.3. So quite a bit reduced there as far as that rolling mass. Of course, these are not different from front to rear. They're going to be the same weight all the way around, so it'll just be a little bit heavier version of the vehicle versus a lighter version, but it should stay theoretically at the 60/40 that it was at with the OGRC wheels. So I'll get this third one mounted up and we'll get them on the truck and check that. All right, final weigh-in with the TREAL wheels and the brass rings and the pin tires. So with the OGRC, we were sitting at 330 grams and we were teetering at 60/40. So it looks like we teetered back to 59.41 with these TREAL. Jumped up to 370, we'll call that 378 from 330. So a little bit heavier, but still lighter overall than the original build with the wheels, so that's good. Okay, here we are, and just when I thought it couldn't look any better than these white letter OGRC and deep dish, I proved myself wrong. These things look freaking sick. All blacked out. I think that looks awesome. Let's see with these limiter straps. Can we get 3 tires? Yep. Just don't have a lot of weight on that back axle, but we've got it. For sure. Man, that looks good. We're kind of getting into the body just a hair with these tires, you can see. But I don't think it's going to be an issue. It's really just right there at the Lexan. Not bad at all. Let's see, I'm going to flip this back here, get that up. Let's see how bad that is. So, not horrible. You see it right there. But man, overall I gotta say I'm super happy with this little guy. Little SCEcto24 and 2 awesome wheel and tire sets here. Great looking alternates. Man, first time I've used just the top and bottom shock hoop limiter straps like I usually am going from a center pivot, but since the battery loads in from the center underneath, there's no good way to go to a center pivot, and the front there wasn't really any good spot as well to go to the center. So I think these are going to work fine since these aren't telescoping or super long travel. There's not really much to limit travel wise anyways as far as the length of the shock, but because they're leaned I'm getting quite a bit of travel out of them, so that works out well. And man, these tires feel great. So I think that is probably going to do it for this little tuning session. And as always, I appreciate you coming along. Hopefully you learned something. Definitely hope you enjoyed seeing this brand new Ecto body. I'm just in love with the paint and the kind of fighter jet theme here. I think that just looks killer. But anyways, until next time, thanks for watching.